This video is a full edit of a photo using a scene referred workflow in Darktable, and it's intended for beginners through to intermediate users. The photo I'm showing does have a couple of problem areas. The main one I'll focus on is trying to restore colours back into blown out highlights. I'm Nicholas, and let's go. This is the photo I would like to edit with you in this video. So as you can see, I've already done two edits with it before, and so when you import from the card, this is what you get in the light table, and these two edits actually are very slightly different, but the methods are the same. Let's go double click and into the dark room and have a look at what we have as a starting point. Now, I took a snapshot of the edited version to see what it should look like at the end. There we are. We have from here to here, and this video will take you through all the steps to get from one to the other. So let's get rid of that. And the first thing you notice in the pipeline, so the pipeline, you'll see it with this kind of on-off switch here. When you're in this tab here, that's the pipeline with the modules that have been applied from the very first one on the raw file to the last one, which is always the output color profile here. And those are the modules that have been already applied by default by Darktable. And you'll notice that I have a warning sign here on white balance and color calibration. Now, why is that? If I click on it, it says white balance applied twice. And this is where I followed a video made by Aurélien Pierre, the developer of color calibration of Filmic RGB. I'll put a link to it below, and I do advise you to go and watch that. I'll give you a quick rundown of what it does and how it works out. Really what happens is it applies a preset to the each camera, and which will fix a white balance, which is not the camera reference, but it is a color balance that is made with the actual camera that you have in your hands. And then on top of that, you do the color calibration normally as you would. So you do get a warning sign, which you can remove in the settings. I like to keep the warning sign so I know that it actually has applied this preset. I know it's got the warning sign, the preset has been applied, and I'm fine. So let's have a quick look. I'll show you very quickly, but do go and watch Aurélien's video, because he's the one who came up with the method. I'll just show you quickly how I got it to work for this particular photo. So the first thing to do is to go into some photo editing software, or probably even just a browser, anything. Just find a big patch of white screen. Yeah, that's left over from Darktable. Okay, that's gone. So big patch of white screen. Pick up your camera and take a picture. You're sitting on your chair in front of your monitor, and you just take a raw photo of that white square. Try not to overexpose it, and then go back to Darktable, go to the light table, copy and import, go to your card. I'm on the card now. I've got quite a few photos on there. I suppose it's the last one. Let's have a look. Little eye there, and you see you have here a photo of the screen, and you import it. Now, this is the naming pattern I use. Now, unfortunately, as of today, this model variable doesn't exist, doesn't work anyway for import. I don't know why. So I put the model, so I have to type it in by hand. GFX 100S, copy and import. There you go. Let's put the collections to 0, and I have here a picture of the screen. And then in the pipeline, everything being put to 0. Now that's strange because I don't have, this is an RF. Filmic hasn't been put in there. There's not much, just white balance. Okay, fine. So white balance is put in. And then you need to measure with this select from area and just draw an area in the middle of the screen, and you'll see the coefficients on the right hand side, the channel coefficients in the white balance module, when you do that, will slightly change. If I put them back again, 2.009, we can actually measure with a colour picker. If you want, let's measure that. So that's not quite grey, it's a little bit yellow. So now we can set white balance detected from area, and now that goes to 133, 133, 134. And if we can make it a bit bigger. And so we have new coefficients that have been put in here, and these are the ones that you store into a new preset. So you store that with the name of your camera, 100S. I've already got this one, so I won't go right to the end of this. Only show for matching images, type in the model GFX100S, close with the percentage marks, and just keep, for me it works if I keep raw and colour. Click on OK, and then every time you get a photo raw file imported with that camera, it will just change very slightly the coefficients to this value here. And then when you add in color calibration, it will say, oh dear, I've got color calibration twice, and you can recolor calibrate. Now I do get actually the same grey 133, 134, 134 back. What happens is not the calibration of the whites, it is actually calibrating the other colours, the reds, the greens, the blues, all the other colours slightly differently, and you get a more pleasing look to it, and I actually find it works. Okay, let's get back to the photo we're going to edit. Let's carry on then with the white balance. Now, I'm going to start by fixing a decent white balance for this photo, and I think the best place to pick up a white balance would be around this zone here, because the buildings were white. Now it was dark, and you can see it's a very high dynamic scene here. It is a sunset, and it was taken from a boat in the river. This is in Bruges in Belgium, and they're typically photos where it's difficult to find a manual white balance, so you look for something that's kind of neutral in the scene. So we're not touching white balance anymore, which is set to my preset for the camera. And now in color calibration, I will pick up the eyedropper and set a white balance somewhere in this zone here. And already, well, that makes a dramatic difference. And it gives us an idea of more an idea of a sunset, I suppose. I'd like to show you quickly what I mean by using this preset here. Now, no use measuring in the area where I picked up the white balance, because that's grey. The differences you'll see in other colours. Now, on some photos, the differences are more spectacular. On skin, it works. I find it works really, really well. On my cameras anyway, it takes off this sometimes a greenish tinge and gives a more natural colour. Let's try and find here, see if we see a difference here. So I have an eyedropper which measures this at 266, 220, 174. Now it's over 255. That is because we're well over the boundaries of, well, we're in an HDR photo here and I haven't set Filmic. If you want to do that straight away, we can always fix some kind of highlight if you want. Oh, we're still over 255. Oh, okay, never mind. No problem with that, because in the output color profile, we will get everything will be set down to levels between 0 and 255 anyway. So no problem about that. The input color profile is Rec 2020, and let's get on with this then. So 269, 218, 165 for the eyedropper that's here, using this white balance that's been applied twice. if now I lock this, I'll just click on it, put a little lock on it, and then I put this to reset, so I'm on camera reference, and then go back in the color calibration and recalibrate the color on the same area. And then what I could do is have a look now at the measures of the RGB values now compared to what they were before. So now we have 268, 219, 166. So you see we have a slight shift in that high color yellow, and that is only due to the difference in white balance calibration with the channel coefficients here. So it's very slight on this example, and we haven't worked through the photo yet to get any colors, but I assure you most of the time I get better colors. And well, the second reason to use it is it does give you a second option, and options are good. Okay, let's stop talking about color calibration now, and let's try and address the main problem in this photo, which is the sun, the setting sun behind the church there. Okay, let's get rid of the color pickers and let's try and adjust the exposure of the picture. So Command or B, which is a little light bulb here, which gives me a white border, which enables me to get the exposure right in the photo. So well, it's quite a dark photo. I don't want it over bright for the moment. I just want to get a good impression. This white border is actually useful for the eyes because it tells me where the white is on the screen rather than a grey, which is not a reference to me. White is a good reference for the eyes to see how bright things are. We are measuring against 100% brightness. And it was quite a dark scene, so I'll leave it like that. And let's get rid of this. And now go into Filmic. So Filmic is the tone compressor, which will, well, in this case, it will compress because I'm in a high dynamic scene. So I have very dark shadows of very bright highlights. Now the highlights here. Now I did underexpose twice, two EVs, not twice, two EVs. And I still have some clipping in the highlights. Now this is, you saw a medium format camera, GFX 100S, which has insane dynamic range. And, well, I should have underexposed even more, I suppose. Recovering shadows is rarely a problem. Recovering highlights is a real difficulty for image processors. So I've blown out the reds, I've blown out the blues, there might be some greens gone, I can't really see. So the colours in all this area are going to be false colours. Anytime there's something clipped on the sensor, then it's the software that has to kind of guess what you want and fill in the colours, and that is not an easy task. So we're going to need to guide the software in these areas here. Now, the problem with digital is that when channels are clipped, if all three channels are clipped anyway, then the actual resulting colour is white. And our setting sun is not white, it was actually very, very yellow. So we need to try and get some yellow back in there. So what can Filmic do? Well, you've already seen me push the white exposure really far to the right. Now, the automatic measure gives me 5.94. Now I want to push it a little bit further. Shouldn't push it too far. I want to kind of push it further to get the areas around here a little bit darker. And the black relative, well, you see if I kind of go to the right, then I'm not lifting any shadows at all. Black relative, I can actually give it that. So I am giving it, I am estimating at 12 plus 6, 18 stops between the darkest and the lightest point. That is only my estimation, it's not real life. And you can see if I click here, then on the scene, I go from minus 13 to 6, which needs to be pushed into 0% to 100% brightness on the screen. And that is what Filmic does. The Next thing we need to do is go into the look tab and see if we can adjust the curve. Really what I'm going to do is going to move some sliders and have a look at the effect on the screen. I am not trying to get a pretty curve. So you have a look which way is the right way. That's the wrong way, obviously, because I have very clear clipping here and some very false, funny looking colours. So that's the wrong way. So I might just push it a little bit the other way. Not too much. I think I'm going in the right direction. The mid-tone saturation, I usually push that quite high in Filmic because I don't like the way that Filmic kind of desaturates highlights on some photos. And in this one in particular, where the highlights were actually very saturated, I mean, I'd be tempted to push it really far. I can't do that because I'm going to have a problem with the curve here, the saturation curve, kind of going over 100 there. Looks a bit weird. Anyway, try and get some colours back in there. And let's have a look. This is the problem we're facing now, is this highlight reconstruction. You can see the very hard transitions and it has gone. It's not quite white. There's slightly more red. But it's not looking good. Now, Filmic can do some reconstruction. We have highlight reconstruction here, which I find works better with this camera in LCH. Usually I get better results. If I'm on a Fuji Trans-X sensor, then LCH doesn't work, so I have to use color. I suppose that's because it's either a biofilter or a Trans-X filter, which are not the same. Anyway, that smooths out the transitions, which is not so bad. The idea would be to kind of push some color into here. Now, that is the weakness at the moment in time. At the time I'm making this video, it's a weakness. I know the developers are working on it to kind of put a new option in highlight reconstruction, but I haven't got that yet. It's not available to me yet, so I'm going to have to sort myself out, kind of the old way, we'll say. So Filmic, I can have a look what's happening with the reconstruction. For the moment there's none, because by default it's a +3. If I put this close to 0, then I do have here an idea of where the reconstruction could take place. And the further I go, the more I have a mask which will show everywhere in white, where Filmic will try and reconstruct the colours. Now the colours were fine out of this zone here, so that's not too bad. And then what I'll do is I'll take a snapshot so I can compare now what I'm doing. I need to put, sorry, that's wrong. I need to minus 0.75. Push it back up. There's no reconstruction. Take a snapshot. Move it down to where I want to be. Now I can make the transitions a bit smoother. It doesn't really matter. And now usually I find the texture is okay on the way up there. And if I have a look at before and after, there is not much of a difference there. So I could go into options and bump up the iterations of high quality reconstruction. Let's move that all the way to 10, just to see if we can see the difference. So before on the left, after on the right. Now there's not much change there, is there? I'll move this down and see if we can reconstruct a little bit more. It's actually not doing much. And the colours, there's a slight difference here where it's smoothing things out. I actually don't like it very much. I'm going to actually give up on that, move this down to 1, zoom out, and say we're done for Filmic, and try and find another solution later to colour in this guy. And now is round about the time where I start thinking about rotation and cropping, getting everything to look kind of a bit straight. So here I'll go into the crop I have here, rotate and perspective. So the structure button works really well, and I will usually correct for vertical lines. See how that goes. Now the cropping is automatic. That's fabulous. And now, why do I have the impression these buildings are leaning backwards? I'll press on G to get the grid, and they're actually not really. Well, they are slightly. The church is very straight, so maybe I need to address that problem here in rotating perspective. I have a rotation here. Maybe I need to kind of lower the rotation here, or increase the rotation, depends which way you're going. I'm just going to eyeball this at minus 1.78. I was at minus 2.5 or something. Now I might come back to that later. Just moving my head backwards there and trying to see the screen, and that actually looks quite good. Now I'm not going to crop the photo because I think the balcony here is okay in the corner. It's taken with a 50mm lens, which is an equivalent of a 40mm in as angle of view on a full frame. So it's not a wide angle by any means. It does give me kind of a nice perspective. Quite like that focal length. Okay, that's done. Rotate and perspective, no cropping. Let's talk about colours now. Now, if you're a bit new to Darktable, you can understand as I go through this in the pipeline here that it's a sequence of problem solving. You can do it in the order you like. The modules will appear in the correct order in the pipeline here, so nothing to worry about. The history is where you get the list of what you actually did in which order, and if you've used several modules or you've modified them several times, we can actually compress the history stack just to keep the last ones, if you want to have a simple idea of what you've done. So now let's talk about colour. Now let's go in the colour tab, colour balance RGB. Let's just switch that on and maybe just add a bit of global chroma. Just give me a bit of colour. So with the chroma, the global chroma will push all the colours away from the center grey point in the colour space. Global saturation will move them away and lower in brightness. We are lowering in brightness. I'm not sure I want that too much, not in global anyway. And global brilliance will push them away from the center point, from the grey point, and increase the brightness. Now that means that they are going to reflect more light, if you like. I don't like that either. So just a bit of global chroma here. Contrast. Yeah, it's contrasty enough, isn't it? Don't really need that. Global vibrance will give extra chroma to the colours that don't have as much. So it's not kind of linear. It's not everyone receiving the same amount. This is kind of proportional. That looks okay. Now I still have this white problem here to solve. Here you see the colour picker here. I'm nearly on a grayscale value. Between the three values are very close to each other, so it is actually not very colourful. So we need to do something about that. For the rest, we see some magenta appearing, a bit of blue. That's not too bad. We can have a look at the masks. I'll just click on the white fulcrum just as a habit, just to make sure that if I adjust luminance on the whites or on the lighter, the highlights, I'm not going to accidentally lower some things. Let's have a look what we have. So we can see those are the dark areas. We have the midtones. There's not much in the way of midtone. And highlights, we actually have some very good highlights. The highlights actually selects most of the sky. Now if I want to reduce that a bit, I can actually push the middle grey out and maybe adjust the highlights fall off so I get a good selection of the sky there. And then if I let go of that, go into the 4 ways, and everything I do on highlights will just be in this area. So if I want to reduce the luminosity of the sky a tad just to get some interesting hues out of there, get some colours back I think. And in the master, now if I go to the highlights, I could actually saturate the highlights, which will bring down their brightness and add chroma. So I'm actually adding too much chroma here because some of this is going horribly orange. Now in the mid-tones, now I don't have much in the way of mid-tones, so there's not much to play with, but in the shadows I could actually desaturate the shadows a little bit. You see, and push them more to white, so I get a kind of more halo effect around the church. Now you like that or you don't. I actually think that removing a little bit is not bad. Brilliance in the highlights, so we can always try and lower that, which removes some emissive value to the sky. So I'm actually getting the clouds back a little bit there, and maybe mid-tones. And let's see what else we can do. Let's give it another go to try and colour in this sun. It's not looking that bad for the moment, but I would like it to be a bit darker in tone, a bit more yellow. So if I right click on the new instance and I can write in sun directly, I'll try and mask the area where there is clipping and where the reconstruction isn't quite what I'd like. And let's try and give some colour to that. So let's go into the masking, into the parametric mask. Now what seems to be the best idea would be to use the JZ, which is the lightness channel. But sometimes we are surprised by the CZ, which is the chroma channel. Now if I press on C, you can actually have a look, and that would cut out most of the buildings. Gives me a good idea if I want to mask out just the buildings, then that channel is perfect. JZ, well, it doesn't look like much there, but if I boost the factor there, then I do get some more detail there. So I can carry on and move that up a little bit more. And there I see the boost factor will give me sometimes a better view of what's happening. So let's use that then. Move this slider up. You see, and now with the boost factor set, I actually have here a selection of the very bright areas, including in the water. So let's click on that, the view display mask. And now what I'm going to do is in the 4 ways, now the first thing I need to do is re-click on this white fulcrum. Let's check the highlights. So I'm not getting anything there. See, shadows, nothing. Don't forget I have a mask. Midtones, there are no midtones, which means that everything is the highlights. Okay. So now the idea would be to use hue here and get something maybe very close to what there is here. Now when you click on that, it actually gives you the opposite colour. So you need to do 228 minus 180, and that's 48, and then you can type in 48. All right, and I have a lot of chroma, far too much. It's actually looking slightly pinky. So I can move that back a little bit to the yellows. It's all adjusting by hand anyway. And the chroma. and maybe add a bit of luminance to it. That doesn't look too bad. Let's see before and after. I've actually coloured in that a little bit, and it's done it in the water too. Now, do I want to add a bit of contrast? Will I be able to get... No, it's not there. Contrast moves around the mid-grey, so that was the wrong thing to do anyway. I don't know why I tried that. The idea would be to try and get a bit of definition back inside there, but there isn't any definition to start with, so maybe I'm looking for something that doesn't exist. I'll move that back a little bit. I think that is better. It's an improvement from white to yellow. Okay, let's say that the sun is looking better, and let's sort something else out. Now I'd like to work a little bit on the top part, which is the clouds, and try and bring out an extra pop there if I can. Now the tool I'd like to use is local contrast. Now I could use diffuse or sharpen, but for such a simple thing I'd like to go with local contrast, and the other reason is that it is so much faster. So just choose local contrast. Now I'm only looking at the clouds here, and it does seem to have a little bit more definition there. So I'm going to now mask out the rest of the image just so it affects these clouds here. So I'm going to use a drawn and parametric mask. I'll start with a gradient just to mask out the top part of the image there. And now just to keep the sky, if you remember what I showed you on the parametric masks, if I go into the chroma channel, then I can remove most of the buildings. Now here you see I'm in LABCH, and I don't have the JZCZHZ. I can get those back by going to the menu here, RGB scene, and I'm in the scene referred workflow, so I have now an access to CZ. And if you look, oh, I've got the mask on at the same time, sorry. The mask there, the sky is pretty saturated. So I should be able to remove the buildings. Let's go a step too far and come back. Now it doesn't really matter if I get some local contrast on these windows. It might even be interesting, and I'll get some bit of maybe local contrast, very slight here. And if you don't want it, you can always increase the contrast, but the transition there gets harder. So I'm actually not going to bother about that. Display mask off, remove the gradient so nothing's bothering me, and let's see how far we can go in the detail. So if you push the details up too far, it gets white. You can actually push them quite far and then remove any local contrast in the highlights. Move that back a bit. As for the shadows, I don't think it's going to change much because I don't have any shadows, so I might as well remove it. And the mid-tone range, I have quite a lot in the mid-tones. I want to move it up until I get a nice clear definition in the sky, on off, and there I can choose, see, and have a look if I've got too much, and if I have too much, then I'll just move the opacity slider down a bit. And there we are, I have some definition back in the sky. Now let's solve another problem. These dark areas here, I'd like to bring up a little bit, and the tool for that I think is the tone equalizer. Switch that on. So the tone equalizer gives you control on the tones, so we can move the exposure up or down for each slice of tones in the image. We need to get a good mask though. I have a warning sign here. Let's click automatic on mask exposure. So it's moved it down. I have some clipping there on the left. Now, as I said, it's a very high dynamic scene. So maybe if I reduce the contrast, I actually get a nice histogram here. And if I look, where am I? The wall here, I'm at about -7. It was this point here, -7. I'm still at -7, -6, all these walls here. There we are, and I have some more, but let's see what happens. So if I just move that up slightly. Now, normally it's not a good idea to move the black point too much because we've already set it in Filmic, or it will be set in Filmic. I'm not too bothered here because it is actually very dark. So if I move up the black point a little bit, that's not too much of a bother. Okay, so now I can see that much better. It's actually affecting a lot of the dark tones in the roofs there. I have to decide whether I want those to be affected or not. I think actually not, because I prefer it to be dark. I actually think this is too much. So I'll come back to that later, and I'll make a drawn mask just around the bridge here, just to keep the adjustments kind of local to the dark area underneath the walls on kind of the river part of the photo. So drawn mask here. I'm going to click on control. Control will give me a straight corner. Now I'll just kind of do a little bit the curve of the bridge, go outside the image, turn down there, come across another point there, click, 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 left click, right click, close the path. And I have a very broad selection here. Now if I move up the feathering, then it will actually make the selection kind of adjust to the tones there are around it, so I won't see a kind of a halo or a hard edge. If I move them, I don't want to move the contrast too much actually. I can move the opacity down just a little bit and give it a bit of a blur just to get a smooth edge. And if I click on shift and move up the feather, I don't think that'll distract. And I think I've got a mask which will give me some nice transitions. Let's click on the little arrow here to get rid of that. I now have before and after, so it's now actually only affecting the bottom part of the photo. And if that's too much, then get the opacity down. So I actually brought up a little bit of detail in the walls there. Now if you can't see any details at all, there is one trick you can use, is the black level correction, which is something you're never supposed to do. I'm at minus 0.0002. Now you see if I start playing around with this, it's working. You see if I move it down, then it moves the white point quite far. I was at minus 0.0002, that's where I was. And if I kind of move it down just a little bit, to minus 0.0004, then sometimes you can get out a little bit more detail. Yeah, I can't really switch that off, but sometimes that can help. It's not actually doing a lot here. I don't mind some very dark areas. It's not kind of clipped in the blacks because I'm at minus 7 EV. You'd see if it's clipped. Well, first of all, if you do the clipping warning, then I don't have any. But I know that because in the tone equalizer, I'm actually in this 0 to minus 8 range. I'm in the minus 7, so I'm in there's lots of very dark areas, which doesn't bother me for this kind of photo. Let's close that. Okay, so we're getting into the late stages, the last stages of editing this picture. What I'd like to do is add a bit more definition to these houses here. Now you've noticed I haven't done any sharpening, I haven't done any noise reduction, I haven't done any lens correction. Now there are reasons for that. First of all, it was taken at 100 ISO, so I'm not really bothered about the noise. For one, let's have a zoom into the shadows here. 100%. Now, I don't know if you can see any noise, but I can't see any. And anyway, I don't have, for the moment, we don't have, for this camera, we don't have the profile. It's just not there, it's generic. So I don't use it because it kind of, have you seen what it does? It just kind of smooths everything over, so that's useless. And as for lens correction, we don't have either. The correction here, it says camera lens not found. So that is another reason. I don't need it really, but the other reason is that I don't have it. So let's go into diffuse or sharpen and have a look at what we can do to these houses. Now we have, let's take a snapshot now. Let's go, we have two options. Well, there are two options that I use anyway. The first one is the local contrast. Let's make that work and take a snapshot. Take snapshot. Okay. And now let's go into the dehaze. Now, I have dehaze 5 here as a preset, and dehaze, the normal one, is there. It's the number of iterations. Just the dehaze 5 is just a preset at 5. Now that has given a huge boost to these houses here. Let's have a look. So on the left we have local contrast, and on the right we have dehaze. Now I tend to like actually dehaze better, but at lower values. So if I put kind of 5 iterations there, so the effect is much lesser. And I actually think, you see, it kind of stays. Local contrast is exactly that. It's two different things. Local contrast will enhance the differences between the darks and the lighter parts of each, well, the pixels around them. Whereas dehaze is kind of more a sharpening kind of tool. And I actually prefer, well, it's a personal choice. I prefer dehaze. Okay, so let's try and just select the houses here to do that on. Now usually while I'm doing this, I'm going to put the number of iterations to 1, because every time I do something it's recalculating everything. So let's go into our parametric mask. Now we know from previous masks that the houses are very desaturated. So I can get rid of the sky in one fell swoop by, choose the mask, removing all the saturated parts of the image. Hey. Now just come back a little bit. Now I'm not too bothered. I don't want to sharpen the church anyway because it's backlit by the sun, so it's supposed to be hazy. These parts here, well, if I feather a little bit the mask, and I don't know whether I really want to blur it, kind of makes it a bit smoother maybe. Now what I also want to do is remove the very dark parts, because I don't really want to dehaze those, because sometimes it just looks a bit weird when you have too much details in kind of the dark parts look very crispy. I'm not too fond of that, so I don't want to zoom there. So JZ for lightness, put our mask back on and remove the darker parts of the images, the photo there. We have kind of quite a good mask. Now I'm not bothered. You'll notice I'm not really bothered about getting it pixel perfect, because I have good smoothing, good transitions from the what is masked, so where the effect will be to where it won't be. So I won't see much in the way of artifacts, and that's what I like about this software, is that the masking is just so brilliant. So there we have it, and let's put these iterations back to 5 and get the job done. And I will clear the snapshots, remove the diffuse, take a snapshot, put it back on again, and then we'll be able to see before and after. And kind of a subtle difference there on the houses. A little bit, you can't really see what's happening in the water there, which is fine by me. So that is a little bit of definition on the houses. It brings some attention to the houses, so the eye can wander from the brightest part to the houses, you know, the eye goes around. Now the last edit I'm going to do, which might be a little bit more controversial, is trying to bring some definition to these clouds. Now I know clouds are not sharp, but I want to make them sharp. There we are, personal choice. Right click, diffuse and sharpen, and we'll do clouds. And I'd like to add maybe, and usually dehaze is the one I use. See what happens to the clouds when those are dehazed. See, not much. Now, why is there not much? Because there's a huge edge sensitivity. So if I remove the edge sensitivity, then, and I'm only looking at the clouds, the rest is really awful. Now, I can actually see a difference between before and after. I get these wispy flows of clouds. I quite like that. So let's remove that. That was before. Take a snapshot. Come on. It's not actually working too slowly for such a huge file. And that is on. So here we have before. I'm just looking at the clouds up here. This is the only area I'm looking at. And I get a bit of definition in the clouds. And I actually like that. As I said, it's a personal thing. I need to mask out the clouds there. So back to the usual. Now I could actually, in this case, use a raster mask, because I actually made some changes, if you remember. Now I have some masks here. I have a mask for the tone equalizer. That was the dark parts. I have one for diffuse and sharpen. If it wants to get that back, it's working. Sorry, I'm so slow. There, that's the buildings. And then I have a mask for the very bright parts to reconstruct some colours in the sun. Oof, got it. And the last one on top, local contrast. Now that one's after Filmic. That's the clouds. That's the one I want. Now the problem is, if you want to reuse a mask, you actually do a raster mask. And the raster mask will take a mask that you've already done before. Now diffuse and sharpen it is here. Now I could move it up, but I can't move it past Filmic. So I can't put it on top of local contrast. You notice that local contrast is in, we're past the linear scene referred workflow. So I'm back into display referred workflow here after Filmic. So actually I was going to do a raster mask, but I can't. So I just have to reconstitute the same mask. So diffuse or sharpen, that was a waste of time for you, sorry. But just to explain that you can actually choose a raster mask here, raster mask, and you can choose a raster mask on modules that are beneath the ones you're on. And then that means you're using the exact same mask. And if you change the mask on the module before, it will automatically update the mask on the module where the raster mask is, which can be useful. But here I cannot use it because it's above in the pipeline and it's after Filmic. So that is not possible for me. So anyway, it was very quick to do. A gradient. This one seems to be very, very diffuse. So let's put gradient. I'm putting the dotted line under the clouds, so I'm sure to catch 100% on the clouds, 50% on the line, and then after that it just kind of goes down. So now I have, if you don't mind, I'm going to put iterations down to 1 just to save time. So for the moment the mask looks like this, and I believe I used the chroma channel here. Switch the mask on, and we will remove the zones where there is very little chroma. And then what I need to do is make sure this time there's nothing on the houses. So let's feather a little bit. I'm not bothered if there's nothing up there. I may be able to remove some dark parts if there are any, just to make sure. Not sure how far I have to go up says working every time. It's a little bit slow now because I have a diffuse and sharpen module underneath. And if you get to the top and it does nothing, then push the boost factor up. It pushes this down, which is actually just making more space in the highlights, just to give you more room. And there we are, we're losing it. I need to move this back. And actually we have something. I think it's not too bad. I don't think we have anything left now in these roofs. And there we are. Let's move that number of iterations. I've overshot it to 19. Okay, right click, 10. Get that in properly. Click on this little arrow, get rid of that. And let's see what we have now. It's working, it's working, it's working here, look. Oh, this is where it's a bit slow. And at last, I think my file has got to the computer. Quite a recent computer from 2019. I've quite a bit of RAM. I think I have 40 gigs of RAM in this. So before and after, once it's done it once, it's a little bit quicker, you see, before and after. I'll have more definition in the clouds there, and that's it. And I'm going to wrap it up there. I will just show you, just out of curiosity, if you like, I have made 3 edits, and I'll show you that 3 edits later, I've got 3 kind of different versions of it, even if I'm trying to do the same thing. So here I've loaded up the 3 edited versions I made of the photo. The one we actually did today is this one here. Now you'll notice that due to rotation and crop, they're not quite aligned, so you'll see some kind of lines around the edges, mainly underneath here. The same edit I actually made for the French version of this video, which is this one. You see, it's kind of different. Now what happened on this one, I thought the buildings were leaning a little bit backwards. I'm sorry about that. That's an unintentional zoom. And so that is the difference there, the correction I made. It's just a rotation, remember. I actually moved back the rotation. I don't know which one is better. That's today's, that's the French version. And the very first one I did when I had this picture was this one here, where the sky is a bit less defined. Now you see the rotation, the cropping is not quite the same. The colours are not quite the same. It's all in the same spirit, but it does show you that if you do an edit, then the next day, even with the same ideals, you make something different. So it may be a good idea to make an edit, let it rest, and pick up the next day and see if you still like it. And if you want to tweak some things, and do it over several days. Don't try and rush editing if it's an important photo you want to keep. So there we are. Well, we'll stop this video here, and I'll see you all soon.